to Daf Tezayin Amud Aleph, about 4 lines down, where the Gemara says V'tarvayu, 5 lines down, V'tarvayu aliba de Rabbi Yehuda. Both of them are going according to Rabbi Yehuda. If you recall, last time we ended off with a brisa. The brisa says, or it's not a brisa, it's a statement, Itmar, the end of Tesvav and Beis. It says over there, Shvua she'ochel kikar zeh hayom, v'avar yom v'lachla. If a fellow says he makes a shvua that he's going to eat a loaf of bread, a specific loaf of bread today, and he didn't eat it. So everybody agrees that you don't get malchus for that. There's Makkot, Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish. Why not? Rabbi Yochanan says you don't get malchus because it's a lav she'im bo ma'isa. You did a lav, you transgressed the fact that you said you're going to eat it and you didn't. But there's no action. You didn't actively do it. It was a passive thing. Reish Lakish said it's a problem of a hasra suffix. You can't give a hasra in the morning because you have no idea what the guy's going to do over the course of the next 12 hours. So we had a machlokes. Basically, Rabbi Yochanan seems to be holding a hasra suffix is called hasra, and Reish Lakish says it's not called a hasra. To which the Gemara says, "V'tarvayu aliv Rabbi Yehuda." They're both arguing in Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Both these Amoraim are really arguing what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Who's Rabbi Yehuda? Titania. So that we could pick up over here, Tezayin Amud Aleph, 5 lines down. Titania, as we learned in a brisa, the pasuk says, which we've seen before, it says, quote, "V'lo sosiru menu ad boker." The pasuk says you're not allowed to leave over kachim, carbon meat, until the morning. One's not allowed to do that. That's a negative commandment. That's a lo saseh. V'hanoser mimenu ad boker. And then it says, but if you left it over till the morning, be'esh tesrofu, that's the language of the pasuk, you should burn it. So here we have a pasuk that says, don't do it. If you did, you should burn it. So Yehuda says, ba hakas of litin asay achar lo saseh. The kasav, the pasuk is coming to give me an asay after lo saseh. Lomar, to tell me she'ein loken love, to tell me you don't get malchus. Divra Rabbi Yehuda. These are the words of Rabbi Yehuda. End of brisa. Rabbi Yehuda says a very simple thing. Similarly, Rabbi Yehuda says the reason by no sir you don't get malchus is because it's what we call a lav hanita glaseh, as we've been talking about. The lav is don't leave it over, but there's naseh. If you left it over, then you should burn it. That's a lav hanita glaseh. That's why you don't get malchus. Now, that's for sure Rabbi Yehuda says. The question is, why would I have gotten malchus? As follows. Rabbi Yochanan dai kachi. Rabbi Yochanan, who's an Amora, he looks at the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Medai kachi, he makes a diak as follows. Hachi, as such. Taima de ba'akasav. The reason is because the Torah wrote it. The reason I don't get malchus is because the Torah added an extra asay to tell me I don't get malchus. Halo ba'akasav. But if the pasuk would not come, if let's say it would not be a asay over there, if it would just say don't leave over meat, and it wouldn't say that you have to burn the next day, loka, you'll get malchus. It's a very simple thing. The Gemara is making a diak, and the Gemara is saying it sounds like the only reason you're not getting malchus is because there's a positive commandment, a way to fix it up. A lav hanit glaseh. If not for that, you would get malchus. What do you see from there? Alma, we see, so this is what Rabbi Yochanan says, hasra suffix shmei hasra. You see from here, obviously, hasra suffix. This is a hasra suffix because I don't know the guy's going to leave it over. In the morning, when he has his carbon meat, if I give him a hasra now, I don't know what he's going to do over the course of the next 12 hours. So you see, Rabbi Yochanan says, you see from here that if you have a hasra on a suffix, that's called a hasra. In other words, if not for the fact that it was a lav hanitik laseh, you get malchus. So Rabbi Yochanan builds from here, you see from here, hasra suffix is called a hasra. Reish Lakish, daikachi, Reish Lakish makes a different diak. The same format, but he comes out with a different thing. Taima de ba'akasa. The reason is because the Torah says there's naseh. Halo ba'akasa. If not for the aseh, loka, you'll get malchus. Alma, you see from here, lav she'im bo maus, lav she'im bo ma'isa, lokan lav. You see from here that a lav which doesn't have an action, you get malchus, because no sir is a lav that does not have an action. And you see, the only reason I'm not getting malchus is because there's a lav hanita glaseh. If it would not be nita glaseh, what would be the halacha? You would get malchus. So Reish Lakish pulls out from here, I see from here, that a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you get malchus. So now, what the Gemara is trying to say over here is, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both looked at Rabbi Yehuda's words. And again, all Rabbi Yehuda said was, the reason Noser does not get Malkus is because it's a lav hanitik lasei. Now, they're both medayik the same thing. They're both saying, if not for that asei, then you would get Malkus. Now, Rabbi Yochanan wants to say, so I see, now there happens to be two elements over here. It is Hasra Safik, and it is a lav she'en bo maisa. But for some reason, each one pulled out what they wanted from there. Rabbi Yochanan pulled out from there, you see, Hasra Safik is called a Hasra. And Rish Lakish pulled out from there, a lav she'en bo maisa, a lav without a positive, without an action, you get Malkus. Now the Gemara is going to ask, obviously both those things are true. So why is each one coming out with a different thing? Which is the next Gemara. The Gemara says, V'reishim v'lakish nami havade hasra safakum. The Gemara says, Reish Lakish, seemingly this is for sure a hasra safik. Why does Reish Lakish hold, as we started with, we saw last time, Reish Lakish holds hasra safik is not a hasra. Seemingly, you see from Rabbi Yehuda, it's not true. You see from Rabbi Yehuda that if not for the fact that Noser is a lava nitig lasei, you would get Malkus. So why doesn't Reish Lakish deduce from there that a hasra safik is called a hasra? In other words, why does Reish Lakish walk away thinking that a hasra safik is not called a hasra? Seemingly, you see from Rabbi Yehuda that it is. The Gemara answers, who savarla, who is referring to Reish Lakish, who savarla, he holds ki'idach tana de Rabbi Yehuda. He holds like a different tana of Rabbi Yehuda. What the Gemara in essence is answering is, you're right, from this Rabbi Yehuda, you do see that Hasra Safik is called Hasra. Because again, like we said, you see both things. From the fact Rabbi Yehuda has to say the only reason you're pater from Malkus is because of lava nita glase, that means if not for that, I do get Malkus. So that shows you two things. It shows you Hasra Safik is called Hasra, and it shows you lav she'en b'maisa, you get Malkus. So the Gemara is saying it's true, but Reish Lakish holds a Hasra Safik is not called a Hasra because he has a different Rabbi Yehuda, a different Braisa of Rabbi Yehuda. Ditanya, let's see this. Ditanya, we learned in the Braisa, Hika zeh v'chazer v'hika ezeh. We're talking about over here, Rashi explains, we're talking about a woman who got divorced and she remarried somebody within 3 months, which she was not supposed to do. So again, she got divorced and she remarried somebody, let's say a week later, and then 7 months later she has a baby boy. Now, the question over here is, that child, we don't know, is he a boy? Is he born to the second father and he's a preemie, he was born at 7 months? Or is he from the first father and he's a baby born at 9 months? That's the question over here. So, if let's say those are 2 months in between, not just a week, but it could be the same thing if it's a week. So the Gemara says, let's say this child walks over, this child who grows up, and he's got these two possible fathers over there. Hikazeh v'chazer v'hikazeh. If he hit this one, and then he hit this one, or kilozeh v'chazer v'kilozeh, or he cursed this one, and then he cursed that one. We know both of them are, hika is punishable by death. Hika shneim b'basachas. If he hit both of them at the same time, o kilo shneim b'basachas, or he cursed both of them at the same time, chayav, you are chayav. The Tanna Kama's opinion is, even though when he walked over to the first guy and he was about to hit him, I'm watching this and I give him hasra and I say, don't do that, because if you hit this guy, you're gonna get malchus, or you'll, right? If you give him a chabura, not just malchus, you're gonna get killed, right? You're gonna get capital punishment for that. So is that called a good hasra? The Tanna Kama says that's a good hasra, even though it's only a suffix, because I don't know if that's really his father. So if he just hits this one guy, so really that's hasra suffix. But the Tanna Kama holds it hasra on a doubt, meaning I'm warning you that it's possible you might get killed. If we ever clarify that this is your father, you're going to get killed for it. So we see from there that a hasra is called a hasra. Rabbi Yehuda says, no. Bibas achas chayav. If it's simultaneously, then you're chayav. If this child walks over to these two people and he's about to punch both of them in the face, and I say, listen, if you do that, you're for sure going to get killed for that, because I don't know which one's your father, but if you hit both of them, you're definitely going to get killed for that. That's hasras vadai. That's a for sure hasra. But bezeh achar zeh, if you do one and then the other, he hits this one, I warn him, and he hits this one. Stops, and then I warn him, and he hits the second one. Rabbi Yehuda says you're pater. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you're pater in that case? The reason is that's called a hasra suffix, because each one person who he tried hitting, I can't for sure tell him, if you do this act, you're going to get punished, because, I don't know, it's his father. That's called a hasra safek. So this is the brisa that Reish Lakish found to show you that hasra safek, even though the first brisa, the brisa by Noser, would seemingly tell us that hasra safek is hasra, you see from this Rabbi Yehuda that hasra safek is not called hasra. As the Gemara is going to say later, obviously there's two Tanoim arguing what Rabbi Yehuda's real opinion is. Now, the Gemara does the same thing in Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, what did Rabbi Yochanan pull out from this Noser of Rabbi Yehuda? He pulled out, obviously you see from here, that hasra safek is called a hasra. That's what Rabbi Yochanan pulled out from there. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan nami havade lav she'im b'maisu. The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, why don't you pull out from there that a lav she'im b'maisa, a negative commandment without an action, you also get malchus. Seemingly, you also see that from here. To which the Gemara says the same thing, similar. Who savrla, he holds, ki had amr of Idi bar Avin, amr of Amr, amr of Yitzchak, amr of Yochanan, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Mishum, Rabbi Yosef Glili, Rabbi Yehuda said, Rabbi Yosef Glili, that kol lo saseh shebetorah, any negative commandment in the Torah, lav sheyesh bo maisa lokan lav, if it's a negative commandment with an action, you get malchus on it. Lav she'ein bo maisa ein lokan lav, it's a negative commandment without an action, you do not get malchus for it. Chutz, there's three exceptions from the rule. Chutz min anishba, somebody who swears. Umeimar, somebody who does something called tmura. Vehamekalas chaver b'shem, and somebody curses his friend with Hashem's name. And the brisa, those are the three exceptions to the rule. Okay, but what do you see from here? What you see is, in general, a lav shein bo ma'isa, you don't get malchus. So once again, what the Gemara is doing over here is, the Gemara is saying, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both looked at Rabbi Yehuda. Again, Rabbi Yehuda said, the only reason Noser does not get malchus is because it's a lav hanitik laseh. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both looked at this, and they both walked away with two different things. Rabbi Yochanan walked away from this and saying, oh, you see, hasra safek is called a hasra. Reish Lakish walked away from this and saying, oh, you see a lav she'im b'maisa, you get malchus. Now, the Gemara says, both those things are true. You see hasra safek shmeasra, and you see lav she'im b'maisa get malchus. So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, why don't you see the other thing? The answer is, he holds like the other, there's a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda here. And the Gemara says the same thing in Reish Lakish. There's obviously two opinions in what Rabbi Yehuda holds, which is what the Gemara says. The Gemara says, Kasha Rabbi Yehuda ad Rabbi Yehuda. We have a contradiction in Rabbi Yehuda, a double contradiction. On one hand, you're telling me that hasra safek is called hasra. On the other hand, the case of Rabbi Yehuda by the guy who hits his father seems to tell us hasra safek is not called hasra. So the Gemara says, Ilar Rav Shimon Lakish, if you're learning like Rav Shimon Lakish, Trey Tanai alibid Rabbi Yehuda. It's a machlokas Tanaim, what Rabbi Yehuda holds. Ilar Rabbi Yochanan. Now, in regards to Rabbi Yochanan, you have a different contradiction. On one hand, you're telling me a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you get malchus. On the other hand, you have this other statement. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Rabbi Yosef Glili, you don't get malchus. Ilar Rabbi Yochanan, lokash, no question. Hadidei, hadirabe. One is him, one is his Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan saying, Rabbi Yochanan himself holds a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you get malchus. Excuse me, Rabbi Yehuda himself says a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you get malchus. Rabbi Yehuda, in the name of his Rebbe, says a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you don't get malchus. Good, that's the end of this sugya, which is really a continuation from what we learned on Daf Tes Vav and Beis. But the bottom line is, if you look back at this brisa, and now we understand a little bit more, where the brisa said, wasn't a brisa, but again, it was a statement which said, if one makes a shavua that he's going to eat the bread, and he doesn't, he does not get malchus. Rabbi Yochanan, for two different reasons. Rabbi Yochanan says the reason is because it's a lav she'ein bo ma'isa. Reish Lakish says because it's a hasra safek. Hasra safek are no good. Both of them do not agree with the other. Meaning, Reish Lakish holds, I don't care about lav she'ein bo ma'isa, because even a lav she'ein bo ma'isa, you get malchus on. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't care about the fact that it's hasra safek, because even a hasra safek, you get malchus on. So they're not talking to each other, and they both come out with two different opinions. And it basically comes from this Rabbi Yehuda. What's the takeaway from this Rabbi Yehuda? The takeaway is lav she'in bo ma'isa lokan love, which is what Reish Lakish says, or the takeaway is hasra safek shmei hasra is what Rabbi Yochanan walks away. And in a deeper sense, as we learned last time, this will affect whether you hold every lav hanitik laseh is bitlu velo bitlu or kimu velo kimu, as we learned last time. Good. If we can move on, there's a little bit of a new thing over here. The Gemara says. The Gemara quotes a Mishnah which is actually the Mishnah later on. It's a Mishnah in the Chulin, but it's also a Mishnah on Daf Yud Zayin. The Mishnah says, Tanan Hasam, we learned over there. Hanotel Eim Alabanim. If one takes, literally Eim Alabanim means he takes the mother bird with the babies, which he's not supposed to do. We know the Torah says what you're supposed to do is send away the mother bird and then take the children. You shouldn't take both of them together. So that is a negative commandment. If you actually look at the pasuk over here, the pasuk says, if I could just read you, the pasuk over here, the pasuk says, Lo sikacha eim alabanim, shaleach tishalach esaim. It's Devarim Chaf Beis, pasuk Vav, 22:6. It says, Ki karei kan sipar lefanecha. If there's a bird's nest in front of you, b'chol eitz or ala eretz, or on the land, afrochem beitzim ve'im revetz al afrochem al beitzim, and the mother is sitting on the baby or on the eggs. Now look at the pasuk. The pasuk says, Lo sikacha eim alabanim. You're not allowed to take the mother with the babies, with the little birds. You're not allowed to. That is a lo saseh. Now, if you look at the next pasuk, it says, Shaleach tishalach haseim. You're supposed to send away the mother. V'asabanim tikach lach, and then you take the children. Now, the Mishnah discusses what happens if somebody didn't listen and he actually took the mother and the children. So the Mishnah says, Tanan Hasam, Hanoto eim albanim, Rabbi Yehuda Omer loke ve'ena mishalech. Rabbi Yehuda says, you get malchus, and there's no option to send the mother bird away now. You ruined it. It was a lo saseh. You had your chance. You were supposed to do it. You didn't do it. Therefore, you get malchus. Now, Rashi explains, according to the Tanakama, which is Rabbi Yehuda over here, according to Rabbi Yehuda, this is what we call, as we learned before, a lo saseh shekadmu aseh. Meaning, when the Torah says shaleach tishalach haseim, that's talking about before you do this, what you should do is you should send away the mother bird. But once you ruined it and you were actually over on the isser of lo sikach eim albanim, you actually took the eim albanim, taflak, you transgressed a negative commandment, you're going to get malchus. There's no reason why not. This is a regular negative commandment. You had a positive commandment to send away the mother bird. That's what you should have done. You didn't, and you transgressed the negative commandment. The Chachamim, if we go a little farther in the Mishnah says, Chachamim say, Mishaleach ve'inaloka. The Chachamim say, no. If you messed up and you took the mother bird, you know what you should do? Just send her away now. Right? Mishaleach, send it away, ve'inaloka, and you don't get malchus. Why? Rashi explains, because the Chachamim understand, Shaleach tishalach haseim is talking about after. It's coming in sequence over here. Lo sikach eim albanim. You should not send away the mother. You should not take the mother on the children. If you did, shaleach tishalach, then send it. This is what we call a lav hanita glaseh. It was a negative commandment where you have the ability to rectify the sin you have done. It's like, no, sir, don't leave over the meat. If you did, then you burn it. Here also, don't take the mother bird with the children. If you did, shaleach tishalach. So again, let's read that inside. V'chamrim mishaleach ve'inaloka. You send it and you don't get malchus. So the machlokas Tanakh, Rabbi Yehuda, and the Chachamim is the word shalech tishalach talking about before I messed up or afterwards? Rabbi Yehuda says it's before. So therefore the lo saseh is 100% bona fide lo saseh, so you get malchus. The Chacham say it's a lav hanit glaseh. And they said as follows, Zeh klal, this is the general rule. This is still part of the Mishnah. Kol mitzvahs lo saseh, sheyesh ba kum aseh. Any negative commandment which has attached to it a kum aseh, which means go do it, ein chayam and aleha, you're not chayav on it. End of Mishnah. Which basically, in theory, everybody seems to agree this also. If you have a lav hanita glaseh, you don't get malchus. Just the Rabbi Yehuda says this is not a lav hanita glaseh. This is a lav which was preceded by naseh. Okay. But the Gemara is now going to focus on what the Chacham said. Zeh klal, this is the rule. Every lav hanita glaseh, you don't get malchus. Now, Rabbi Yochanan said about this, Rabbi Yochanan the Amora approached this Mishnah and he said, Anu, they put in the word Anu, we, Ein Lanu, we don't have Elazos v'od acheres. We only have this and one more. An example of a lo saseh hanitek laseh, where what we say is, you could just fix it up and therefore you're not going to get malchus. Rabbi Yochanan is saying, there's this case and there's one more. Amalei Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar said, Hecha, where's this other one? You tell me there's only two scenarios like this of a lav and nitik lasei. So Rebbe Lazar said, where is this? Amalei said, L'chi tishkach. When you find it, go and find it. So the Gemara says, in other words, Rabbi Yochanan put him up to the challenge, and he said, go look for it. Go look what the other case is. Nafak, he went out. Dok, he looked into Vishkach, he found it. He found another case of a lav hanitik lasei where you don't get malchus. The Tanya, as we learned in a brisa. Onus, so this is familiar to us from Daf Tezvav. Onus shegirish, we're talking about the rapist once again, who again the Torah says that he has an obligation to marry this woman and he's not allowed to divorce her. Now it says, Onus shegirish, if he divorced her, which he was not allowed to do, Im Yisrael, who if he's a Yisrael, he doesn't get malchus. Even though he did a negative commandment, he transgressed it, because Torah says don't divorce her. He did. So the Mishnah says, the Brisa says, Machzer ve'inu loke. All he needs to do is remarry her. Right? As we spoke on Daf Tesvav and Aleph, all he needs to do is take her back, remarry her, and you get yourself out of the necessity of malchus. You don't get malchus because you could always fix up this lav. Vim Kohen, who, if he's a Kohen, loka ve'inu machzer. If he's a Kohen, then you get malchus, and there's no option to return her, to remarry her, because a Kohen cannot marry a divorcee. So a Kohen, we have no option. We have no way to save you. But if you're Yisrael, we'll just say, okay, just remarry her. Now, what is that? That is an example of a lav hanitik lasei. You weren't supposed to get divorced. You transgressed the lav. And what we say is, you don't get malchus. All you got to do is remarry her. Because the Torah says, v'lo siya isha, lo with a vav, she should be for him a wife. And what the Torah is saying is, if you messed up on the lav, there's a way to fix it. What you do is, you go and now remarry her. Now, the Gemara explains, now if we could go back to what we learned also on Daf Tesvav, there are two approaches how to understand lav hanitik lasei. If you will recall, we had a machlokas Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Reish Lakish said the understanding is very simple. When you transgress the lo sasei, you transgressed it. That's it. You're done. Beis Din will call you in, and Beis Din will say, okay, you have an option. You can either accept malchus, or you could decide to rectify the lav by doing the asay. But Beis Din is not going to let you out of Beis Din until you choose one of those two things. So either rectify it with doing the asay. If you don't do the asay when we tell you to do it, you'll get malchus on the spot. That's a lav hanitik lasei. It means the lav was done, and we're allowing you to fix it with the asay. Rabbi Yochanan disagreed, if you'll remember. Rabbi Yochanan said, the understanding is bitlu v'lo bitlu. What does that mean, bitlu v'lo bitlu? What it means is, the lav was never fully finished until I took away the option to rectify it. In other words, when you do the lav is not complete yet, because I always have, you can never give me malchus. You'll call me into Beis Din and say, okay, you transgressed the lav, we want to give you malchus. I'll say, I didn't finish the lav yet. I didn't totally transgress this negative commandment, because I always have the ability to rectify it. And don't tell me when to do it. I can do it whenever I want. Until I nullify the ability to until I nullify the ability to do the asay, the lav was never finished, and therefore I won't get malchus. When I actually mevatel the asay, that's the time when I'm going to get malchus, because that's the completion. If you went and you took away the ability to do the asay, then you now finish the lav, and now you're going to get malchus. It might be 62 years later, but it doesn't matter. So for the first 62 years, we can't touch you. We can't give you an ultimatum, because you never fully completed the lav. And you always have in your pocket, you could say, I wasn't mevatel the asay yet, and therefore it means I never did the lav yet, I don't deserve malchus. I did 80% of the lav, but until I take away the option of the asay, I still have the ability to say I never finished it, I never did the lav. But 62 years later, when you're mevatel that asay, you nullify the ability to actually do the asay, that's when we're going to nail you, and then you're going to get malchus. That's called bitlu v'lo bitlu. So, for example, if we could apply it to our case of the bird, the guy took the mother and the children. So what are we saying? Shaleach to shaleach. If you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, what does that mean? Kimu v'lo kimu. Kimu v'lo kimu. Excuse me. If you hold like Reish Lakish, kimu v'lo kimu. What does that mean? What that means is, if you took the mother and the child, Beis Din will call you in. Beis Din will say, you have an option now. You just did a lav in the Torah, so do one of two things. Either send away the mother bird right now. We're going to watch you. If you don't do that, if you're not mekayim the asay, you have to opt for option number 2, which is you'll get malchus. In other words, you already did the lav. We're giving you a way to rectify it. You don't want to rectify it? So fine, you're going to get malchus because you did a lav. Rabbi Yochanan says, no. Rabbi Yochanan says, when I took the mother and the children together, I did a lav. It's not completed yet. So Bezin comes over to me, Bezin says, you did a lav. I say, I didn't complete the lav yet. Maybe I'm going to send it away. How do you know I'm not going to? Bezin cannot give me any ultimatums until if I walk over to the mother bird and I kill the mother bird, I just took away the ability to ever do the asay. At that moment, Bezin's going to walk over and give me malchus because now you just completed the lav. There's no more options to do the asay. So now the Gemara is saying, let's see if that applies to this case of the. So we know that Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, kimu v'lo kimu, bitlu v'lo bitlu, can both fit into the shiluach hakein case. Now, Rabbi Yochanan said there's another scenario. What's the other scenario? So Rabbi Lazar looked and Rabbi Lazar found it's referring to the case of the onus case. So the Gemara says, the case of the onus, where the guy got divorced, and then we say, okay, you should remarry her. The Gemara says, Hanicha, this is very good, Laman de Tani, Kimu v'lo Kimu. This is very good if you hold Kimu v'lo Kimu. So I understand the case of the divorce of the rapist, where he divorced her. Bezin will say, okay, either remarry her or get malchus. El Laman de Tani bitlu v'lo bitlu. But the Gemara says, according to the one who says bitlu v'lo bitlu, which parenthetically Rashi speaks out happens to be Rabbi Yochanan, Bishlam agabe shluach hakan. I understand by shluach hakan mishkachasla. I understand the concept of bitlu v'lo bitlu by shluach hakan. Makes sense. If you kill the mother bird, that's the moment you finish the lav, and then you're going to get malchus. Ella onus. The Gemara says bitlu v'lo bitlu hechi mishkachasla. How are you going to find a scenario of bitlu v'lo bitlu? Again, the guy divorced. He raped this woman. He married her like he was supposed to, and then he divorced her. He transgressed the lav. Now, what are you saying? He's only going to get malchus if he's mevatel the ability to remarry her. What does it mean, mevatel the ability to remarry? How do you nullify the ability to remarry her? As long as she's alive, you could remarry her. And if she drops dead, that's not him nullifying it. So what does it mean? How do you nullify the ability to remarry her? And the Gemara goes through a couple of scenarios. The katla, if the pshat is that he killed her, so this woman, he divorced her, and then he's saying, no, you can't give me malchus because I might remarry her. And then he walks over to her and he shoots her in the head. So maybe that's what it means, bitlu v'lo bitlu. That's what it means. The second he does that, he's going to get malchus. Because when he kills her, besides the fact that he killed her, he's taking away the ability to remarry her. You can't marry her once she's dead. But the Gemara says that's not true. Kam le b'derabba. Right? We have the rule which is kam le b'derabba. We always give the more stringent punishment. If somebody does something, if somebody kills somebody and he deserves malchus for the same act, we'll put him to death. He's not going to get malchus. So if this guy walked over to this woman and killed her, he'll get killed for it, but he's not going to get malchus. So the Gemara is asking, what's the scenario by the case of the onus that you're going to get malchus for nullifying your assay? How do you nullify the assay of being able to marry a woman? So that was try number one. Amr Simi Mechuznoi tried to answer. Kigon shekibula kedushin me'acher. This fellow, this rapist, what he did was, after he divorced her, he accepted kedushin on her behalf to marry somebody else. And therefore what? By him, he acted as a shliach, so to speak. Some fellow wanted to marry her. He accepted the kedushin on her behalf, and therefore she's a married woman now. So he, with his own hands, nullified the ability to remarry her. So maybe that's what it means. Bitlu v'lo bitlu, that he nullified the ability to remarry her by having her marry somebody else. By accepting, we know that a woman can accept kedushin through a shliach. So the Gemara asks, one second, Amar Rav. Rav asks, Rav on the change of gersa, Isha v'sei shliach, if she made him a shliach, ihi kamavadle, then she's the one being mavato it. The Gemara is saying, you can't just randomly accept kedushin for some woman. Obviously, she made you a shliach. If she made you a shliach, it's not him who's doing it, it's her who's doing it. If she did not make him a shliach, kol kamine, does he have all this power? Velo klumu, and it is nothing. But the Gemara, what Rav is asking is, again, we need to try to find a scenario where the guy himself was mevatel l'aseh. He himself did it. Nobody else did it. Again, if she would just drop dead, that's not called him being mevatel it. He wouldn't get malchus. He's only going to get malchus if he's the one who dug his own grave. He's the one who took away the ability to do the asay. Like by the bird. He killed the bird. So he made it that he can't do the asay. So I'm saying, how does that apply to the woman? You're going to tell me he accepted kedushin for her to marry somebody else? Well, the Gemara says, if he was appointed a shliach, so he's just an extension of her hand. She's the one who's being mavatal it. He shouldn't get malchus to that. And what are you going to tell me? She didn't make him a shliach? Well, if she didn't make him a shliach, then she's not married to this guy, because you can't accept kedushin for some woman if she didn't appoint you a shliach. To which the Gemara says, El Amar of Simon Ardoi, Kigon Shehidira Berabim. He made a neder in public, and he said, he makes a neder, which means I'll never have any hana from this woman. By saying that, he's saying, I'll never marry this woman. So he was mevato it by himself with his own hands. So Gemara is saying that's the case of bitlu v'lo bitlu. So again, the rapist, he raped this woman, he married her like he was supposed to, he divorced her. So he's in limbo now from the fact when he divorced her, we're not going to give him malchus because he could always say, maybe I'll remarry her. You don't know when I'm going to do that. He could play that game for a long time. But once he makes a neder barabim, he makes a neder in public, and he says, I will not have any hana from this woman, he just took away the ability for him to ever marry her, and right then he's going to get malchus, because that's the completion of the lav. To which the Gemara asks, that's very nice, but hanicha, this is very nice, lamanda amar, to the one who says, neder shehuda barabim, a neder which was made barabim, ein lo hafara, has no way to nullify it. If you hold that it's impossible to nullify such a vow, good, it's a nice pshat. El lamanda amar yesh lo hafara, but the one who says there is a way to nullify it, that even if you do barabim, you could just go to a rav, and the rav can nullify your neder, ma'ikal amemar, what is there to say? Meaning, it's not impossible to do that say, so that's not called your mevatel, the ability to remarry her. You made a neder barabim, big deal. Go to a rav, get it nullified, we know you could be mater neder, and then you can remarry her. So Gemara is asking again, what's the case where you nullified the asay, you took away the ability for you to do the asay? The Gemara answers, Dira la al das rabim. This is different. You made a neder al das rabim, means he said, based on the knowledge of the rabbim, I will never remarry this woman. I will not get any hana from this woman. He didn't do it in public, but he did it based on the knowledge of the public. And the Amar Meimer, because Meimer said, Hilchasa, the halacha is neder shehuda barabim, a neder which was made publicly, yesh lo hafara, that you could nullify. But al das rabbim, if it was made based on the consent of the rabbim, ein lo hafara, that there's no hafara, there's no way to nullify that. Period. That's the end of the Gemara for now. What the Gemara is saying is, so I found you the case of bitlu v'lo bitlu by the rapist. How is he mevatel the asay? The way he's mevatel the ability to remarry her is he made a neder based on the consent of the rabbim. If you do a neder on the consent of the rabbim, there's no turning back. Everybody seems to agree. There's no way to be made for that neder. There's no way to nullify that neder, and therefore, by doing that, by making that neder, he no longer can remarry her, and therefore he'll get malchus. Good. So far we have two cases. So we have the case of, again, we're trying to find bitlu v'lo bitlu and kimu v'lo kimu in a lava nitik lasei. So we know one is shluach haken, and the other one is the case of onus. So we understand what Rabbi Yochanan was saying. Rabbi Yochanan said, the Mishnah of shluach hakan, and there's one more out there. So Rabbi Lazar took up the challenge, and he found the case of onus. To which the Gemara asks, V'suleka, and furthermore, there's no other cases of lava nitik lasei where you could be mevatel the asay, and therefore, then when you're mevatel, you nullify the asay, you'll get malchus. But there is gezel. What about stealing? The Rachman Amar, the Torah says, quote, lo sigzol. The Torah says you're not allowed to steal. That is a negative commandment. V'heishiv es agzela, and it says you should return the theft. So the Gemara is asking, seemingly, you have the same thing over here, which is, the Torah says you're not allowed to steal. That's a negative commandment. A guy stole. What should he do? What he should do is, it says, V'heishiv es agzela, he should return the theft. Question number one. Question number two, mashkin, also, when somebody takes collateral from somebody. The Rachmana Amar, the Torah says, quote, lo savo el beiso lavot avuto. You shouldn't go to his house to take your thing. Hashev tashiv lo. Let's stop there. Lo sava beis lavadavuta. You're not supposed to go to his house and take away his thing. You want to take a mashkin, you want to take collateral from him, you should not be going into his house to take it. And the pasuk says, but if you did, hashiv tashiv lo, you should return it to him. Ha'avod kivah shemesh. By sunset, you should give it back to him. The pasuk is talking about something that he's going to use at night. If you took it, which you weren't supposed to, you should give it back to him at night. So the Gemara is saying, I have two cases of lava nitik lasei, stealing, and the case of taking somebody's collateral. Umishkachasla, and you could find it, bikimu v'lo kimu, ubitlu v'lo bitlu. And the Gemara is saying, whether you hold like Reish Lakish or you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, that every lava nitik lasei, you analyze it as kimu v'lo kimu or bitlu v'lo bitlu, it should fit into the case of Gezel. For example, the Gemara is saying in the case of Gezel, what does it mean? A guy stole. So a guy stole, now he transgressed a lo sasei. So if you hold kimu v'lo kimu, Beis Din will say to him, okay, you now have two choices. Either, what you should do is, either you should return the theft, or you're going to get malchus on the spot. That's kimu v'lo kimu, very nice. Bitlu v'lo bitlu also, where the guy stole. So we're going to say he's not going to get malchus unless he nullifies asay. How do you nullify the asay? He took the theft and he burnt it. Or in the case of the mashkin, he took it and he burnt it. The time he burns it, you just nullified the asay. You have no longer an ability to do the positive commandment. So now you should get malchus. So Gemara saying, why is this not a case of lav hanitik lasei? The Gemara answers. So again, let's read again. Umishkachaslan, you find it bikimu v'lo kimu, bitlu v'lo kimu, bitlu v'lo bitlu. The Gemara answers, Hasam, over there, Keva de chayev b'tashlumim, since you're chayev to pay, in loke u'mishalim, you're not loke u'mishalim, you're not going to be loke and pay. Since you're chayev to pay, you're not going to be loke and pay. So what does that mean literally? So what that sounds like is, from the language of the Gemara, when I stole this thing and then I burnt it, at the time I burnt it, so now I owe him the money for this thing. Till now, I could just return the object. The second I burn it, I now owe him $100 for the fact that I burnt his object. We have a rule. So what do you want to tell me? Also, I should get malchus now. But we have a rule. You don't get malchus and mammon. Remember, kedei rishaso means that you only get one punishment. You never get malchus and mammon together. So what the Gemara is saying is, it can't be that you're mevatel asay by burning it, and then you tell me that's a case where I get malchus, because I'm not going to get malchus in that case, because since I'm chayiv to pay for it, that's not a case where I get malchus, because you can't get both. You get one or the other. That, according to the girsa that we have, that's the understanding. Tosas over here, at the bottom, Tosas has a different girsa. Tosas is bothered by, we know anytime you have malchus and mammon, the halacha is actually you get malchus and not money. Here the Gemara sounds like you're going to get money and not malchus. You pay the money and you don't get malchus. Other Rishonim answer that question, that here's a special pasuk that says that. But Tosas, if you look at the bottom Tosas, he has a different girsa. Tosas says, Hasam isa b'tashlumim kishasarfo v'chayvo mammon. Tosas has a whole different shot. What Tosas says is, what the Gemara means to answer is, even if you burn his object, you still owe money. So you never were totally mevatel the asay. What are you telling me? I have asay to return the theft. So even if I don't return the actual object of the theft, if you burnt it, you're still going to owe him money. So that never went away. So what the Gemara is saying is, there's never a way to be mevatel the asay. If you stole something worth $100, no matter what you do to the theft, you're still going to have a chiyuv to return the $100 to the guy, any $100. Therefore, there's never going to be a situation of bitlu v'lo bitlu. There's never going to be a situation of being mevatel the asay, because you can't be mevatel asay, because you're always going to be chayiv to pay the guy back. Okay, but that's a machlokas. Depends which girsa you have. But either way, the Gemara's point is, this is not a good example. Gezel and mashkin is not a good example, because you're going to be chayiv to pay. So therefore, malchus is off the table. Again, we're trying to find a case of lav nitik lasay, where when you're mevatel asay, you're chayiv malchus. Maskafla Reb Zera, so Reb Zera asked, Ha'ika mashkona shel ger. What about if you took the collateral of a ger? A ger, the assumption is he has no relatives. Let's say he didn't have any kids, so he has no relatives in front of him. He was a convert. He has no children. So if a guy stole his mashkun, umeis hager, and the ger died. So the Gemara is asking is, over there, when you burn his object, don't tell me I'm chayiv to pay, because there's nobody to pay to. So the Gemara is saying, this is a case where you'll get malchus. where the guy stole from a ger, and the ger died, and now you're mevatel the thing. You can't pay it back. My answer is Hasam over there. Gavra bar tashlumimhu. Over there, you're really chayiv to pay the shibuda the ger who the kapaka, but it's the shibud of the ger which sort of fell off. In other words, you're really obligated to pay. It's just you have no way to pay to. So the Gemara is answering. It's the same thing as the same case as the mashkin, a regular mashkin. We say it's not bitlu v'lo because you're always chayiv to pay. Here also you're still chayiv to pay. It could be parenthetically you have no way to pay to, but you are obligated to pay and you just don't have anybody to give it to. So that's why it's not a good case. So the Gemara tries one more example. So again, we're trying to find a case of lav hanitik lasei, where if you hold like Rabbi Yochanan, what that means is I'm not going to get the malchus until I nullify the asay. The Gemara says one more question. Va'ika peya. What about peya? We know peya is the mitzvah that you're supposed to leave over. You're supposed to leave over the stalks on the side of your field, in the corner of your field, for the poor people. The Rachmana Amar, the pasuk says, quote, Lo sechale pas sadecha. Torah says you're not supposed to leave over. You're not supposed to devour. You're not supposed to cut off the corners of your field. You're supposed to leave it for the poor person. In other words, you want to harvest your field, that's very nice, but you can't touch the corners of the field. That's supposed to be left for the poor people. And the Torah says, La'ani v'lager tazavosam. Afterwards, the Torah says you should leave it for the ani and the ger. You should leave it for the poor person. So now, if let's say somebody harvested his entire field, including the corners, what did he do? He transgressed a negative commandment. And still, what do we say? We have a lav, that's a lav. It's nitak laseh. You have the ability to fix it with an aseh. What's the way to fix it? The Torah says, Lo ani v'lager tazam, leave it over for the ani. Even though you messed up, so now leave it over. So Gemara is saying this is a good example of another lava nitik laseh. Umishkachas la bekimu v'lo kimu, bitlu v'lo bitlu. You could find it also. I could find it. It could work out to Reish Lakish. It could work out to Rabbi Yochanan. How so? Let's talk about that. Kimu v'lo kimu. What would that mean? What that means is you harvested your entire field. So Bezin will call you in, and Bezin says, okay, if we hold like Reish Lakish, you just transgressed a negative commandment. Now you have a choice. Either leave it for take what you took and put it back in the corners there and leave it for the poor people, or accept malchus. One or the other. Kimu v'lo kimu. Either be mekayim nasei, and if you're not mekayim nasei, you'll get malchus. And it's one of those two options. You're not getting away with one of those two. So the Gemara is asking, why aren't we saying this case? Now, parenthetically, how do you get it into bitlu v'lo bitlu? What would that mean? The guy harvested his whole field. So the guy says, no, you can't give him malchus yet because I always have the ability to leave it over for the poor people. So the Gemara says, okay, but how do you have a scenario of bitlu? How do you mevatel that? Seemingly, he could always do that. Ditznan, and the Gemara says, so you read like this, the mishkachas la kimu v'lo kimu, you find it by kimu lo kimu, and bitlu v'lo bitlu. Ditznan, as we learned in the Mishnah. The Mishnah says, mitzvahs peya lahafresh min hakama. Really, the mitzvah lechatchila of peya is to take off from the stalks when it's still growing from the ground. You're supposed to leave it in the corner. Lo hifresh min hakana. If you didn't take it from the stalks, mafresh min omrim. You should separate it from the bundles, which means lechatchila you're supposed to leave it while the stuff that's growing. Leave it for the poor people. If you didn't, and you already cut everything down, so at least leave over from the bundles. Lo hifresh min omrim. If you didn't do peya from the omrim. Mafresh min akri. You should separate peya. If you already didn't do it from the bundles, you already made it into grain, so you should separate it from the pile. Ad shelo mirach, before you smoothed it over. So if you made it into grain already, so before you smooth it over, leave over a piece for the aniyim. Miracho, if you already smoothed it over, which we know in regards to meiser, once you smooth over the pile, it's now officially chayav meiser. The halacha is meiser v'nosin lo, then you take off meiser and you give it to him. This is the end of the Mishnah. So what does the Gemara want from here? It sounds like that it's only once it's in other words, you have a couple options. You should leave it while it's growing. If you didn't leave it while it's growing, at least leave over in the stalks. If you didn't leave while it's over in the stalks, at least leave it over when you make a pile. If you smoothed over the pile, leave it over. But what it did leave out over here is, Rashi explains, if let's say you ground up the wheat Not only did you make a pile of it, right? You made it into grain. You made it into grain, and you actually piled up, but you actually ground it up into flour, and you made a dough from it. Now, at that second, when you made a dough, it sounds like from the Tanakama, from this Mishnah, you no longer can give payah. You took away the ability to leave payah because you can't give payah from dough. You could give it from the stalks, you could give it from the bundles, you could give it from the pile, but once it's already dough, that's it, too late. So the Gemara is asking, I found you another case of bitlu v'lo bitlu, which is the guy didn't leave over payah. He transgressed the lo saseh. What do we say to him? So the guy says, you can't give me malchus until I'm avatal aseh. So you're right, we'll wait, but the second he makes this into dough, if he takes all the stuff from his field and makes it into wheat and into dough, he was officially mevatel aseh. Now you no longer can give payah. That's what it sounds like from this Mishnah. Because the Mishnah says only once it's still a pile. After that, it's too late. You can't give payah anymore. And therefore, the Gemara is asking, what you have over here is a case of bitlu v'lo bitlu. Why is this not counted? To which the Gemara answers, Kidder Rabbi Shmuel. The Gemara answers, according to Rabbi Shmuel, the Amar who says, Af mafresh min isa. The Gemara answer is, okay, we're going like Rabbi Shmuel, who says you could give payah even from the dough. Rabbi Shmuel argues on this Mishnah, and Rabbi Shmuel says even if it's dough, you could give it. To which the Gemara asks, Ul Rabbi Shmuel nami mishkachas la. The Gemara says, according to Rabbi Shmuel, also I could find you a case of bitlu v'lo bitlu. How so? The achol isa. If the guy eats the dough, even according to Rabbi Shmuel, there's going to be a point of no return. If the guy took the dough, again, he was supposed to take off payah. So he did a negative commandment. He didn't do it. What does he say? He said, no, you can't give me malchus yet because maybe I'm going to leave payah. Okay, but the second he eats the dough of all that field, whatever it is, when he eats the dough, he officially was mevatel aseh. He no longer can be mekayim naseh, and that's when we're going to give him malchus. As soon as he eats that cookie, he officially now transgressed the isser of not giving payah. The whole time I didn't give him malchus because I could say, wait, maybe he's going to give payah. But once he eats the cookie, then he's done. So the Gemara's question is, why didn't we list the case of payah? In other words, the question is on Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said there's only two cases. The case is shiluach hakein, and seemingly the case of onus. So the Gemara is saying, what about payah? Seemingly this is a great case of bitlu v'lo bitlu. The Gemara answers, you're right. Elazos v'od acheres. When Rabbi Yochanan said this, you turn back to Amud Aleph. When Rabbi Yochanan said this and another one, meaning referring to the case of shiluach hakein, and there's one other case, what do you mean the other case? He meant this. He meant payah. Shiluach hakein and payah are the cases of lava nitiglasei bitlu v'lo bitlu. To which the Gemara says, Elazos v'acheres, aha, it's going on this. The Gemara says, Ava ones lo, but the case of ones is not a good example for our purposes. Why? Seemingly, let's go back to the case of ones. Seemingly, ones is a good case also because when the guy made a neder on the consent of the rabbin, there's no afara. The Gemara says, "Dehecham minan al das rabbin in lafar." When do we say if you make a neder on the consent of the rabbin, there's no way of nullifying it? That's ledvar shus. That's only if it's for an optional thing. It's not a mitzvah. Av ledvar mitzvah yesh lo afara. But something that's a mitzvah, even if you made it al das rabbin, you can nullify your neder. So the Gemara's answering is, the Gemara is saying, really the two cases are shiluach hakim and va'od acheres is referring to payah. Why not the case of onus? The answer is onus, the rapist, will never find the case of bitlu. What's the case of when he nullified the asay? Till now we thought, well, maybe he made a neder on the consent of the rabbin. But the Gemara is saying now, if you make a neder on the consent of the rabbin, and you want to do a mitzvah, you're allowed to nullify it. So over here, he wants to do the mitzvah, mimekayim naseh. So you're allowed to nullify it. So there's never a scenario where he's going to nullify it and then be chayiv malchus. Therefore, onus is not the case. The case is shiluach hakan and payah. And the Gemara just brings a story to this that you can nullify it for dvar mitzvah. Kiha, like this, the whole mikri dardiki, there was a mikri dardiki, which was a teacher of children. Tavi pasha biyanuka. Rashi says he was negligent with the children. He hit them a little too strong. Adre Rav Acha made a neder on him that he shouldn't be teaching anymore because he was hitting the kids too hard. Vahadre Ravina, and Ravina returned him. Ravina reinstated him to his position, even though Rav Acha made a neder al das rabbim, which seemingly does not have any afara. But Ravina returned him to lo ishkach. They couldn't find the daik kavase. They couldn't find somebody who was so particular like him. He was a good Rebbe. So you see, even though he made a neder al das rabbim, and usually it does not have a farah like we learned before, but if it's for a dvar mitzvah, then you could. That's the end of the sugya, and that's the end of lav hanitik lasei. So if we could go back to what we went through now, we started with Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish are both coming from Rabbi Yehuda. Which Rabbi Yehuda? The Rabbi Yehuda of Noser, where it says by Noser, the reason you don't get Malkus by Noser is because it's a lav hanitik lasei. So Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both run with that. Rabbi Yochanan says, I see from here, Hasra Safik is called Hasra. Reish Lakish says, I see from here, a lav she'im bo maisa gets Malkus. To which the Gemara asks, according to Reish Lakish, seemingly we see elsewhere that Hasra Safik is not called a Hasra. Seemingly you see from here also, according to Reish Lakish, that Hasra Safik is called a Hasra. So the Gemara answers, you're right, but Reish Lakish holds like the other Rabbi Yehuda who says, by the son hidden the two fathers, you see clearly over there Rabbi Yehuda holds Hasra Safik is not called Hasra, which the Gemara says obviously it's two Tanaim in Rabbi Yehuda whether Hasra Safik is called Hasra. Similarly in Rabbi Yochanan pulls out from here a lav she'im bo ma'isa you get malchus. The Gemara says, what about you see Hasra Safik also? So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yochanan pulls out from here Hasra Safik is called Hasra. The Gemara says, seemingly you see from here a lav she'im bo ma'isa you get malchus also. The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan holds like the other Rabbi Yehuda who says that lav she'im bo ma'isa you don't get malchus. It's a contradiction, Rabbi Yehuda. It's not. One's Rabbi Yehuda himself, one's his Rebbe. Good. Then we brought the Mishnah in by Shiluach HaKein, where we had a machlokes. Is it a lava nitik laseh or not? Rabbi Yehuda says it is not a lava nitik laseh, therefore you get malchus on the spot. Chum say it's a lava nitik laseh. Rabbi Yochanan said this and one other one. Lava nitik laseh, there's this and one other scenario. So Rabbi Lazar said, where is it? Rabbi Yochanan said, go find it. Rabbi Lazar came back and he said, I found the case of the rapist case. So the Gemara says, what's the scenario of bitlu v'lo bitlu by the rapist case? If he killed her, he's chay misa. He's not going to get malchus. So the Gemara said, okay, maybe he accepted kedushin on her behalf, but if she made him a shliach, then she's the one who did it. If she didn't make him a shliach, it's worthless. So the Gemara said, okay, maybe it's talking about she made a neder barabim. But the Gemara said that he made a neder barabim. That's also machukas. The Gemara said, it's talking about he made a neder al das rabim. And das rabim has no afara, to which ultimately the Gemara says that's a bad pshat also, because for a dvar mitzvah you could uproot it. So ultimately the Gemara says, then the Gemara, in the interim, the Gemara asks, what about gezel, what about mashkan? The Gemara says, no, there you pay money. What about mashkan of a ger? There also you have money, it's just the ger can't collect because he's dead and he has no relatives. The Gemara said, what about the case of peya? Seemingly peya is the other case. So which the Gemara said, because peya, seemingly you can't be mavato it. The Gemara said, the case of peya where you have bitlu v'lo bitlu, where the Gemara said that seemingly once you made it into dough, you no longer can take off peya. So the Gemara tried answering, no, we hold like Reish Shmuel where even on the dough you could take off peya. To which the Gemara said, well, even according to Reish Shmuel, if you eat it, you no longer can take off peya. The Gemara said, you're right, and that is the case of zos v'od acheres. That is what Rabbi Yochanan is referring to. So the end of the day, the lava nitik laseh, which we are referring to, is shiluach hakin, and the case of peya, kimu v'lo kimu, and bitlu v'lo bitlu.